When I was 25, I took a job as a lighthouse keeper on a remote island off the coast of Maine. I thought it would be romantic, like something out of a novel. Just me, the ocean, and plenty of time to write the book I'd been putting off for years. The pay was decent, the isolation sounded peaceful, and I figured 6 months away from civilization would do me good after my messy divorce. The lighthouse was on Little Ram Island, accessible only by a weekly supply boat. The previous keeper, an old man named Dutch, spent exactly 1 day showing me the ropes before he practically sprinted onto the departing boat. I remember thinking it was odd how eager he was to leave, how he kept looking over his shoulder at the lighthouse like it might follow him. "Keep the light running, keep the log updated, and don't go down to the basement unless you absolutely have to," he told me. When I asked why, he just shook his head. "You'll understand soon enough." The first few weeks were exactly what I'd hoped for. I fell into a routine, maintenance in the morning, reading in the afternoon, watching the sunset, then climbing the spiral stairs to ensure the light was functioning properly. The island was small, maybe 2 acres of rocky terrain with some scraggly trees and a lot of seabirds. The lighthouse itself was over 150 years old, built in 1847, with thick stone walls that kept out the constant wind. I started noticing the sounds around week 3. At first I thought it was just the building settling, or maybe the wind playing tricks. But these sounds were different. They came from below, from that basement Dutch had warned me about. Scratching sounds, like nails on stone. And sometimes, late at night, I'd hear what sounded like someone whispering, though I could never make out the words. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was rats, or the plumbing, or my imagination running wild from too much isolation. But the sounds got worse, louder, more insistent. One night, around 2 a.m., I was woken by the sound of the basement door opening. I knew that sound intimately by then, the specific creak of those old hinges. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, and I could hear footsteps climbing the stairs. Slow, deliberate footsteps. I grabbed the flashlight I kept by my bed, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I waited, barely breathing, staring at that door handle, waiting for it to turn. It didn't. Instead, I heard the whispers again, clearer now. They weren't in English. The language sounded old, guttural, like nothing I'd ever heard before. And then, just as suddenly as they'd started, the footsteps retreated back down the stairs. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, I decided I had to know what was in that basement. I've been avoiding it, telling myself I was respecting Dutch's warning, but the truth was, I've been afraid. Now I was more afraid of not knowing. The basement door was heavy oak, reinforced with iron bands. I had to put my full weight into pulling it open. The smell that hit me was overwhelming. Damp earth, mold, and something else, something rotten. The stairs descended into darkness. My flashlight beam seemed to get swallowed by the black, barely illuminating a few steps ahead. I counted 23 steps before I reached the bottom. The basement was larger than I'd expected, extending beyond the lighthouse's foundation. The walls were rough-hewn stone, covered in patches of some kind of dark fungus. But what caught my attention were the marks on the walls, scratches, hundreds of them, covering every surface, and words carved deep into the stone. "Help me. Don't let them take me. It watches from the water. They speak in the dark." I felt my blood run cold. These weren't old carvings. Some of them looked recent, the stone still pale where it had been scratched away. That's when I noticed the corner of the basement that my flashlight hadn't reached yet. There was something there, a shape I couldn't quite make out. As I moved closer, my light revealed what looked like a nest made of seaweed, driftwood, and pieces of fabric. Old clothes, maybe. And bones. Small bones, like from birds or fish. But there was something else in the nest. A book, wrapped in what looked like oilcloth to protect it from the damp. My hands were shaking as I unwrapped it. It was a journal, and the first entry was dated 1923. It belonged to a lighthouse keeper named Samuel Pritchard. I started reading, right there in that basement, unable to stop myself. Samuel wrote about his first few months on the island, how peaceful it was, and how much he enjoyed the solitude. But then he started hearing the sounds, the same sounds I'd been hearing. He described going down to the basement and finding something. He never said what exactly, just kept referring to it and them. The entries became more frantic as they went on. Samuel wrote about seeing figures in the water at night, watching the lighthouse, about hearing voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, about finding wet footprints leading from the basement to his bedroom door. The final entry was barely legible, written in what looked like a hurry. They want in. They've always wanted in. The lighthouse keeps them out, but only as long as the light stays on. If it ever goes dark, they'll come. They'll finally come. I can't do this anymore. I won't. Better to drown than to let them in. If you're reading this, keep the light on. No matter what you hear, no matter what you see, keep the light on. According to the historical records I'd read when I took the job, Samuel Pritchard had drowned after falling from the rocks during a storm. His body was never recovered. I don't know how long I stood there clutching that journal. It could have been minutes or hours. Finally, I heard a sound that snapped me back to reality. Dripping water. I turned my flashlight toward the sound and nearly dropped it. There was water seeping up through cracks in the basement floor. Not a lot, just thin streams that reflected my flashlight beam. But we were at least 30 feet above sea level. There shouldn't be water coming up through the floor. As I watched, the water began to spread, pooling in the low spots of the uneven floor. And in that water, I saw something move. Just for a second. Just a shadow. But it was there. I ran. I practically flew up those stairs, slammed the basement door shut, and shoved every piece of furniture I could move against it. My rational mind was screaming that I was overreacting, that there had to be a logical explanation, but my rational mind wasn't in charge anymore. That night, the scratching was worse than ever. It sounded like dozens of fingers clawing at stone, all at once, and the whispers had become voices, still in that strange language, but louder, more insistent. I could hear them through the floor, through the walls, all around me. I climbed to the light room at the top of the lighthouse and stayed there all night, watching the beam sweep across the dark water. And I saw them. Figures, standing in the surf. Dozens of them, perfectly still, all facing the lighthouse. They were humanoid, but wrong somehow. Their faces blank, smooth skin where features should be, and their hands had too many fingers, each one ending in something sharp. They pressed against the glass, those terrible hands splayed out, leaving wet marks that wouldn't dry. I don't remember much of the rest of that night. I think I might have blacked out from fear. When I came to, it was dawn, and they were gone again. The supply boat arrived 6 hours later. The two-man crew who picked me up said I looked like hell. I probably did. I grabbed my bag, gave them some excuse about a family emergency, and didn't look back as we left the island. I never told anyone the full story. Who would believe me? I wrote it off as isolation-induced hallucinations, cabin fever, stress from the divorce, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard. The lighthouse is automated now. No more keepers needed. They installed new systems, updated everything. The light stays on automatically, all the time, no matter what. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if it had gone out while I was there. Sometimes I wonder what's still down in that basement waiting in the dark water. But mostly, I try not to think about it at all. Last month, I heard they're planning to decommission the lighthouse. Make it a historical site, maybe. Open it for tours. They're going to shut the light off permanently. I don't think I'll be visiting the Maine coast anytime soon. I used to work as a fire lookout in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State. For those who don't know, fire lookouts are the people who sit in those little towers you sometimes see on mountaintops, watching for signs of wildfire. It's a solitary job, often weeks alone without seeing another person, and that's exactly why I took it. After my mom died, and I spent 6 months drowning in sympathy and pity from everyone who knew me, I just wanted to be alone. The tower I was assigned to was called Copper Ridge Lookout, sitting at about 6,000 feet elevation. It was a standard 14 by 14 foot cabin on stilts, with windows on all sides and a catwalk running around the outside. My supplies were helicoptered in once a month, and I had a radio for emergencies and daily check-ins. Otherwise, I was completely alone. The first 3 weeks were exactly what I needed: peaceful, quiet, healing. I'd wake up with the sun, scan the forest with my binoculars and the Osborne firefinder, read, write in my journal, and watch the stars at night. I saw deer, mountain goats, eagles, and one black bear who seemed confused about why a building was sitting on top of his favorite rock. Then on day 23, I saw the hiker. He appeared around mid-morning, coming up the trail from the east. This wasn't unusual. The trail to Copper Ridge was popular with experienced hikers. What was unusual was that he stopped about 100 yards from my tower and just stood there, staring up at me. I watched him through my binoculars. He was wearing hiking gear that looked expensive, had a large backpack, and appeared to be in his 30s. Nothing particularly remarkable. But he didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there, looking at my tower for about 5 minutes before he finally continued up the trail and disappeared around the ridge. Weird, but not alarming. People are strange sometimes. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to use the bathroom. The tower was pitch black except for the red glow of my equipment lights. As I was crossing to the bathroom corner, something made me look out the west window. He was back, standing in the exact same spot, about 100 yards away, just standing there in the darkness, facing the tower. I felt a chill run down my spine. How could he even find that spot in the dark? The trail wasn't marked, and even with a headlamp, navigating these mountains at night was dangerous. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it in his direction. The beam didn't quite reach him, but I saw him move, turning away and walking back down the trail. I radioed it in the next morning during my check-in. The ranger station said they'd note it, but weren't too concerned. Probably just a hiker who got turned around in the dark and was trying to relocate the tower. Made sense, I guess. But he came back the next night, and the night after that, always at almost exactly 2 a.m., always standing in the same spot, always just watching. On the 4th night, I decided to do something about it. I set my alarm for 1:45 a.m. and prepared my most powerful flashlight. When 2 a.m. came and he appeared again, I went out on the catwalk with a megaphone we kept for emergencies. "This is a restricted area," I called out. "You need to clear the area and return to the main trail." He didn't move, didn't respond, just stood there. I tried again, my voice cracking a little this time. "Sir, I'm going to report you to the ranger station if you don't leave. You're trespassing." That's when he started walking toward the tower. Not running, just walking at a steady pace. I rushed back inside and locked the door, a useless gesture since it was just a wooden door with a simple latch, but it made me feel slightly better. I watched him approach through the window. When he reached the base of the tower, he stopped. He looked up at me. I could see his face clearly now in the moonlight. He was smiling, not a friendly smile, but wide and fixed, like someone who'd never smiled before and was just imitating what they thought it should look like. Then he started climbing the stairs. The stairs to a fire lookout tower are exposed, metal, and spiral around the support columns. There's usually 40 or 50 steps depending on the height of the tower. I counted each one as he climbed, each footstep ringing against the metal, getting closer. When he reached the catwalk level, I could hear him walking around the tower, circling it.
I followed his movement through the windows, keeping him in sight. He was still smiling, looking in at me through each window as he passed. Then he stopped at the door and tried the handle. Once, twice, 3 times. The latch held, but it wouldn't for long if he really wanted in. "What do you want?" I shouted, trying to keep my voice from shaking. He pressed his face against the door's window, cupping his hands around his eyes to see better. When he spoke, his voice was muffled by the door, but I could hear every word. "I've been watching you. I know your schedule. I know when you sleep. I know when you eat. I know when you're scared. You're scared right now." His smile got wider. I grabbed the radio and called for help, not caring that it would take hours for anyone to reach me. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me, and maybe hearing her voice made him realize his game was over, because after a few more minutes of just standing there, he walked back down the stairs and disappeared into the darkness. Rangers came up at first light with a helicopter. They searched the area, but found no trace of him. No camping gear, no tracks beyond the immediate vicinity of the tower, nothing. They asked me to describe him, took some notes, and told me to keep my radio on at all times. They posted an officer with me for the next week, which helped me feel safe enough to sleep, but they couldn't stay forever, and eventually I was alone again. He never came back when I was awake, but every few nights I'd wake up around 2 a.m. with that prickling feeling of being watched, and I'd see him standing in his usual spot, just barely visible in the darkness. I stuck it out for another month before I requested a transfer. They moved me to a different tower about 50 miles north, one with a more accessible trail and more frequent hiker traffic. I told myself it was because I wanted more human contact, but the truth was I was scared. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching, waiting. At the new tower, everything was fine for the first week. Then, on day 8, I saw a hiker coming up the trail around mid-morning. He stopped about 100 yards from the tower and just stood there, staring at me. Same expensive hiking gear, same large backpack, same face, even though it shouldn't have been possible. I didn't wait around to see if he'd visit that night. I called the rangers, packed my essentials, and hiked down that very day. I didn't even care about my stuff left in the tower or the paycheck I'd lose. I just had to get out. I quit the fire service entirely after that. Got a job in Seattle, surrounded myself with people and noise and light. I've never gone hiking alone again. Never spent a night away from civilization. But sometimes when I'm having trouble sleeping and I glance at my bedroom clock, I see it's 2 a.m. exactly. And sometimes I can't shake the feeling that if I looked out my apartment window, I'd see him standing on the street below, looking up, smiling that terrible smile. I live on the 14th floor now. I tell myself that makes a difference. I'm not sure it does.
My name is Rebecca, and 3 years ago, I spent 2 weeks house-sitting for a wealthy couple in rural Montana. I was between jobs, between apartments, between relationships. Basically, my life was in complete limbo, and the idea of getting paid decent money to watch someone's house while they vacationed in Europe sounded perfect. Easy money, some time to figure out my next move, and the couple seemed nice enough when we met for the interview. The house was about 40 miles outside of Billings, down a long gravel road that twisted through forests and across empty fields. The nearest neighbor was 7 miles away. The couple, Paul and Linda Morrison, were in their early 60s, retired, wealthy from some tech company Paul had sold years ago. The house was exactly what you'd expect from people like that. Modern, expensive, full of art and fancy furniture that I'd be terrified to break. Linda spent 2 hours showing me around, pointing out where everything was, explaining the quirks of the house, showing me how to work the security system, the gate remote, the espresso machine that probably cost more than my car. They had 2 cats, Simon and Schuster, both fat and lazy and uninterested in me. "The only thing is," Linda said as we were finishing the tour, "please don't go into the basement." I must have looked surprised because she quickly added, "It's not that you're not allowed technically, it's just that Paul keeps a lot of expensive equipment down there for his photography hobby, and the insurance company is very particular about who accesses that room. We've even had to keep it locked. It's easier if you just avoid it entirely." Fair enough. I wasn't interested in photography equipment anyway. I signed the paperwork, accepted the keys and the alarm codes, and waved goodbye as they left for the airport. The first few days were perfect. I spent my mornings on the back deck with coffee, my afternoons exploring the property, and my evenings curled up with books from their extensive library. The cats warmed up to me slowly but surely. I felt more relaxed than I had in months. Then, on the 4th night, I heard the basement door open. I was in the living room watching TV when I heard it, that distinctive sound of a door opening, followed by footsteps on stairs. Wooden stairs, going down. I muted the TV and listened. The footsteps descended slowly, one at a time, until they faded away into silence. My first thought was that one of the cats had somehow opened the door, even though it was supposed to be locked. I got up and walked to the basement door, which was in a hallway off the kitchen. The door was closed, and when I tried the handle, it was locked. I stood there for a moment, my ear pressed to the door, listening for any sound. Nothing. I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Old houses make sounds, I reasoned, especially big houses in remote locations. The wood expands and contracts with temperature changes. Perfectly normal. The next morning, I checked the basement door again. Still locked. I even rattled it a bit, making sure it was secure. It was. That night, I heard the footsteps again. This time I was in bed, reading. Same sequence of sounds, door opening, footsteps descending. I grabbed my phone and crept down the hallway to the basement door. Locked. Always locked. I called Linda the next day, trying to sound casual. "Hey, just a quick question. Does your house make weird sounds at night, like creaking sounds?" "Oh, probably," she said, her voice slightly distant, distracted. "It's an old house. Well, the foundation is old, anyway, built on the site of the original homestead from the 1890s. Paul insisted on keeping part of the old structure when we renovated. You know how sentimental he can be." We chatted for a few more minutes, but she didn't seem concerned, so I dropped it. I felt silly for even bringing it up. But the sounds continued. Every night around 11 p.m., I'd hear that door open and the footsteps descend. I started to dread evening, started to feel anxious as the clock approached 11. I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at the hallway, waiting for it to happen. On the 8th night, the sounds changed. The door opened, the footsteps descended, but then I heard something else. Dragging, like something heavy being pulled across a floor. The sound went on for minutes, then stopped. Then the footsteps came back up, and the door closed. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, the cats huddled against me like they sensed my fear, and watched dawn break through the windows. I called Linda again that morning, but she didn't answer. I left a voicemail, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey Linda, it's Rebecca. Could you call me back when you get a chance? There's something I need to talk to you about regarding the house." She didn't call back. That night, I decided I was going to open the basement door. I had the keys. Linda had given me every key in the house, just in case. I checked, and one of them was labeled basement. I just took a quick look, see that there was nothing down there but photography equipment, and I'd be able to relax for the remaining 6 bays of my house-sitting gig. At 10:45 p.m., I stood in front of the basement door with the key in my trembling hand. I'd turned on every light in the house, I had my phone in my pocket, 911 already dialed and ready to call with a single tap. I was as prepared as I could be. I unlocked the door. The smell hit me first. It wasn't terrible, but it was distinct. Earth, moisture, and something else I couldn't identify. The stairs descended into darkness. I found a light switch and flipped it, and a single bulb illuminated a wooden staircase leading down. "Hello?" I called out, feeling stupid even as I said it. "Is anyone down there?" No response, just silence and that earthy smell. I started down the stairs, counting each one, 14 steps total, ending in a concrete floor. The basement was larger than I expected, running the full length of the house. It was mostly empty. No photography equipment, no storage, nothing except bare concrete walls and a dirt floor on the far corner. Wait, dirt floor? I walked closer. A section of the floor, maybe 10 feet square, was just packed earth instead of concrete. It looked like someone had dug up the concrete and filled it in with dirt. And in that dirt I could see depressions, like something had been buried and then dug up recently. Several somethings, different sizes, scattered across the patch of earth. My throat went dry. My hands started shaking. I took a step back, then another, and that's when I heard it. Scratching, coming from behind one of the walls. Not loud, but distinct. Fingernails on concrete. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I ran. I flew up those stairs, slammed the door behind me, locked it, and shoved a chair under the handle for good measure. Then I grabbed my laptop and started searching. Morrison House, Montana brought up nothing useful. Paul Morrison, photographer, showed a LinkedIn profile, but nothing else. Morrison House history led me to some county records, and that's where I found it. The original homestead on the property belonged to the Garrison family. In 1891, they all disappeared. Mother, father, and 3 children, ranging in age from 5 to 13. No bodies were ever found. The case remained unsolved, labeled as likely murdered by persons unknown. The prevailing theory was that traveling bandits had killed the family and buried them somewhere on the property. The house had sat empty for years before being torn down. The land changed hands several times before Paul and Linda bought it. I was still reading when I heard the basement door rattling. The chair I'd shoved under the handle was holding, but something was pushing against the door, trying to get out. I could hear breathing on the other side, ragged and wet. I didn't pack. I just grabbed my purse and keys, scooped up both cats who yowled in protest, and ran for my car. I drove straight through the night to Billings, stopped at a 24-hour veterinary clinic that agreed to board the cats, and checked into a hotel. I called Linda 30 times over the next 2 days. She finally answered on the 3rd day, sounding annoyed. "Rebecca, what's wrong? Why are the cats at a vet in Billings?" I told her everything, every detail, every sound, everything I found in the basement. She listened in silence, and when I finished, she said, "I see. Well, thank you for letting us know. We'll handle it from here. Obviously, we won't be needing your services anymore." She hung up. An hour later, I received a text with instructions for collecting my payment, half of what we had agreed on. Nothing else. No explanation, no acknowledgement of what I experienced, nothing. I tried to follow up on it after they returned from Europe, called them, sent emails, even considered going to the police. But I had no evidence, nothing except my own account of what happened. And when I drove past the property a month later, I saw it was surrounded by new fencing with no trespassing signs and security cameras every 50 feet. I did some more digging online. The Garrison family case remained unsolved, but some local historians believe the family was killed by someone they knew, possibly even someone they'd invited into their home. The killer was never caught. I think about those depressions in the dirt a lot, about what might have been buried there, about what might have been dug up, about those scratching sounds behind the wall. I think Paul and Linda knew exactly what was in their basement. I think that's why they needed someone to house sit, someone to be in the house at night. I just don't know why. I've never house sat for anyone since, and I've never gone into a basement again if I can help it. Sometimes I wonder if they found someone else to watch the house while they travel. I wonder if they heard the sounds too. I wonder if they went down into the basement. I hope they ran like I did. I hope they got out. I'm a long-haul trucker, and I've driven just about every highway in the continental United States. You see a lot of strange things when you're on the road as much as I am. Weird weather, bizarre accidents, people doing things that defy explanation. But nothing I've seen before or since compares to what happened to me on Highway 50 in Nevada, the loneliest road in America. This was in February of 2019. I was hauling electronics from Sacramento to Denver, and I decided to take Highway 50 across Nevada because I-80 was a mess due to snow. It was a clear night, cold as hell, and I hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour. The stretch of 50 between Fallon and Ely is about 250 miles of absolute nothing. No towns, no gas stations, nothing but desert, and the occasional ranch. I'd been driving for about 6 hours and was starting to think about finding a place to pull over for a rest when I saw the car on the side of the road. It was an older sedan, maybe early 2000s, pulled onto the shoulder with its hazard lights blinking. A woman was standing next to it, waving her arms. I can't just drive past someone in trouble in the middle of nowhere, so I slowed down and pulled over about 50 yards ahead of her. As I climbed down from my cab, I could see her more clearly in my mirrors. She was young, maybe mid-20s, wearing jeans and a light jacket that was definitely not warm enough for the freezing desert night. She jogged up to my truck, and I could see her breath puffing out in white clouds. "Oh, thank God," she said, and her voice was shaking. "I've been stuck here for 2 hours. My car just died, and I don't have any cell signal." I nodded. Cell coverage on Highway 50 is spotty at best, non-existent at worst. "Where were you heading?" "Ely. I live there. I was coming back from visiting my sister in Fallon." She hugged herself, shivering. "Is there any way you could give me a ride? I'll pay you. I can pay whatever you want." I hesitated. I have a strict rule about not picking up hitchhikers, even stranded ones. Too many horror stories about what can happen. But it was freezing. She'd be waiting for hours before another vehicle came by, and she genuinely seemed distressed. "All right," I said, "but I'm going to need to see some ID first, and I'm calling this into my dispatcher." She nodded eagerly and pulled out her driver's license. Jennifer Hollis, 26, with an Ely address. I took a photo of it with my phone and called my dispatcher, letting them know I was picking up a stranded motorist and giving them her information. They weren't thrilled, but didn't say I couldn't do it. Jennifer grabbed a bag from her car, locked it up, and climbed into the passenger seat of my truck. I cranked up the heat. We got back on the road. "Thank you so much," she said, still shivering. "I was starting to think I was going to freeze to death out there." "You got a boyfriend or husband in Ely? I can call ahead if you want to let someone know you're okay." She shook her head. "No, I live alone. No family there, just me. My sister's all I've got, and she's in Fallon." We drove in silence for a while. She seemed content to just warm up and stare out the window at the dark desert. I kept the radio on low, some late-night talk show discussing conspiracy theories, and focused on the road. About 30 minutes in, Jennifer spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you believe in ghosts?" I looked at her, surprised by the question. I don't know. Never really thought about it much." "Why?" She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I died on this highway 3 years ago." My blood went cold. I looked at her again, really looked at her. She was staring straight ahead, her face expressionless. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "February 14th, 2016. I was driving back from my sister's house in Fallon. A drunk driver crossed the center line and hit me head on. I died instantly. Right about where you picked me up tonight." I felt my hands tightening on the steering wheel. That's not funny." She wasn't joking. She pulled out her driver's license again and handed it to me. I took it with shaking hands. The expiration date was March 2016, more than 3 years ago. "That doesn't prove anything," I said, my voice rising. "Pull over." "What?" "Pull over. Check your phone. Google my name. Jennifer Hollis, Ely, Nevada, died 2016. I didn't want to pull over. I wanted to keep driving. Get to Ely as fast as possible. Get this woman out of my truck. But something in her voice made me do it. I pulled onto the shoulder and grabbed my phone. I had 1 bar of signal. I typed in her name, and the results came up immediately. Jennifer Marie Hollis, 26, of Ely, Nevada, died February 14th, 2016 in a tragic automobile accident on Highway 50. She is survived by her sister, Patricia Hollis of Fallon, and numerous friends and community members who will miss her bright spirit and kind heart. Services were held February 19th at the Ely Community Church. There was a photo. It was her. Same face, same smile. Same person sitting in my truck right now. My phone slipped from my hand. I looked at her, and she was crying now, silent tears running down her face. "I don't know why I'm still here," she said softly. "I don't know why this keeps happening. Every few months, I'm back on that road and my car breaks down, and someone stops to help me, and I get in their car and I try to warn them, but I can't. Not until we've been driving for a while. It's like I'm stuck in a loop, and I can't get out." "This isn't real," I said, more to myself than to her. "This can't be real." "Do you want me to prove it?" she asked. "Really prove it?" Before I could answer, she reached for the door handle. "Don't," I started, but she'd already opened the door. She jumped out of the moving truck. We were still going about 40 miles per hour, and I slammed on the brakes, my heart in my throat. The truck skidded to a stop, and I threw it into park, jumping out. I expected to see her on the road, injured or worse, but there was nothing. No body, no blood, nothing. Just the empty highway stretching out in both directions, illuminated by my headlights. I walked back along the road calling her name. "Jennifer! Jennifer!" Nothing. She was gone. I stood there on the cold highway for I don't know how long, just trying to process what had happened. Finally, I got back in my truck and noticed something on the passenger seat. Her bag. The one she'd grabbed from her car before getting in with me. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside were normal things. A wallet, some makeup, a book, some receipts. I opened the wallet and found her real driver's license, not the expired one she'd shown me. Same name, same face, but this one wouldn't expire until 2018. There were also some photos. Jennifer with an older woman who must have been her sister. Jennifer at what looked like a birthday party. Jennifer standing next to the same sedan I'd seen on the side of the road, smiling at the camera. And at the bottom of the bag, wrapped in tissue paper, was a card. One of those Valentine's Day cards, the kind you give to someone special. It was addressed to Patricia, "Love always, Jen," in neat handwriting. It had never been sent. February 14th, Valentine's Day. The day she died. She'd been going to visit her sister, probably to give her this card. I sat there in my truck, holding my card, and I started crying. I'm not ashamed to admit it. This young woman stuck in some loop she couldn't escape, trying to deliver a Valentine's Day card to her sister that would never arrive. Repeating this same night over and over, picking up strangers, trying to tell them what happened, trying to warn them, and then vanishing into the night. I didn't know what to do with the bag. I thought about trying to find her sister, Patricia, in Fallon. But what would I say? "Hi, I picked up your dead sister's ghost and she left this bag in my truck." Who would believe that? In the end, I did the only thing I could think of. I found a church in Ely, the same church where her funeral had been held, according to the obituary, and I left the bag with a note explaining where I had found it. I didn't mention the rest. I couldn't. I finished my run to Denver, but my heart wasn't in it. I couldn't stop thinking about Jennifer, trapped in that loop, unable to move on, unable to reach her sister, unable to rest. I've driven Highway 50 dozens of times since then. Sometimes, late at night when there's no other traffic, I slow down when I pass the spot where I picked her up. I've never seen her car on the shoulder again. I've never seen her standing there, waving for help. But sometimes when the wind is right and the night is quiet, I think I can hear something. A voice, carried on the desert air, calling for help. And I wonder if she's still there, still stuck, still trying to get home. I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore. Not ever. Not because I'm afraid of them, but because I'm afraid of what they might tell me. I'm afraid of what truths might be revealed in the cab of my truck on those long, lonely stretches of highway. The loneliest road in America. They named it right.
My name is David, and I work in IT. Specifically, I do contract work, going from business to business, setting up networks, fixing servers, that kind of thing. Most of it's boring, routine stuff. But in the fall of 2020, I got a contract that was anything but routine. The client was a company called Artemis Data Solutions. They just moved into a new office building on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, and needed their entire network infrastructure set up. It was a big job, probably 2 weeks of work, and the pay was excellent. The only catch was that I'd have to work nights. They wanted the system operational by their official opening date, but they needed to do it after hours so their contractors doing the interior work weren't disturbed. Fine by me. I'm a night owl anyway, and the night differential made the already good pay even better. The building itself was relatively new, maybe 5 years old, and had been sitting empty for most of that time. It was one of those spec buildings that developers put up hoping to attract tenants, but the location was just a bit too far out to be desirable. Artemis got a great deal on it, apparently. I met with the project manager, a woman named Sarah. She gave me access cards, alarm codes, and the keys to the server room. "You'll be the only one here at night," she explained. "Security comes by about twice per shift, but otherwise you'll have the place to yourself, all 3 floors." Sounds good. Quiet is good for this kind of work. She nodded, but then hesitated. There is one thing. The 3rd floor is still under renovation. We're not using it yet, and the contractors haven't finished up there. So just don't go up there if you don't have to. Some of the electrical isn't complete, and we don't want any liability issues. No problem. My work is all on the first 2 floors anyway. That first night was uneventful. I showed up at 10 p.m., let myself in, and got to work running cables, mounting switches, and configuring routers. The building was eerie in its emptiness. New carpet smell, fresh paint, and the kind of silence you only get in a building where no one has lived or worked yet. But I've worked plenty of night shifts in empty buildings. It didn't bother me. Around 1 a.m., I needed to check something in the main server room, which is on the 2nd floor. I took the elevator up, walked down the quiet hallway, and was just unlocking the server room when I heard it. Footsteps. Above me. On the 3rd floor. I stopped and listened. They weren't loud, just the soft sound of someone walking. Probably security, I thought, doing their rounds. But then I remembered that Sarah had said the 3rd floor wasn't finished yet. Would security be walking around up there in the dark? I pulled out my phone and called the security company's number Sarah had given me. A bored-sounding guy answered. "Yeah, this is David. I'm the IT contractor at the Artemis building. Are your guys on the 3rd floor right now?" "Hold on." He heard keyboard clicking. No. My guys aren't due for another check-in for about an hour, and they wouldn't go to the 3rd floor anyway. We were told it's off limits due to construction." "Okay, thanks." I hung up. The footsteps had stopped. I told myself it was just the building settling, or maybe pipes, or any of 100 other mundane explanations. I finished my work in the server room and went back downstairs. But the next night, I heard them again. Same time, around 1 a.m., footsteps, walking back and forth on the 3rd floor. I tried to ignore them and focus on my work, but they were persistent, almost pacing. On the 3rd night, I decided to take a look. I know Sarah had said not to go up there, but I had access to the whole building, and if there was a squatter or something, they'd want to know about it. The 3rd floor was dark. The renovation was clearly in early stages. Bare concrete floors in places where carpet hadn't been laid yet, exposed wiring, stacks of building materials. I used my phone's flashlight to navigate, calling out "hello" as I walked. No response. No more footsteps. Just silence. I was about to turn back when I saw it. A door at the end of the hallway was open, just a crack. Light was coming from inside the room. Not electric light. This was flickering, like candlelight or a flashlight. "Hello?" I called again. "Security!" The light went out. My instinct was to run. Every horror movie I'd ever seen was screaming at me to get out of there, but I also felt stupid. I was a grown man, afraid of flickering lights and footsteps. So I walked to the door and pushed it open. The room was empty. Completely empty. No furniture, no materials, no candles, no flashlight, nothing. Just a bare room with concrete floors and unpainted drywall. But written on the wall, in what looked like charcoal or black marker, were words. "Get out. Not safe. They're still here. Help us." My skin went cold. I backed out of the room and practically ran for the elevator. I didn't stop until I was in my car, doors locked, engine running.
I called Sarah the next morning. "There's something you need to know about the building," I said, and told her about the footsteps and the writing on the wall. She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "David, what I'm about to tell you is not public information. The company that built this building, there was an accident during construction. A scaffolding collapse on the 3rd floor. 3 workers died." My blood ran cold. "When?" "About 4 years ago. It was covered up, sort of. There was a settlement with the families, NDAs were signed. The building sat empty after that because it got a reputation. No one wanted to rent it. We got it for practically nothing because of the history. And you didn't think to tell me this before sending me to work there alone at night?" "I didn't think it mattered. It's just a building. Those men died, which is tragic, but that doesn't make the building haunted or..." "There are words on the wall, Sarah. They're still here. Help us." Someone wrote that. Probably kids who broke in, or vagrants. Old buildings attract people looking for shelter. Kids didn't write that, and no vagrant would know about what happened during construction. She sighed. "Look, I understand if you want to quit, but we really need this work done and we're on a tight deadline. I can double your rate for the remainder of the contract, and I'll make sure security does more frequent patrols." I should have quit. I knew I should have quit. But double the rate? That was serious money, and I had bills to pay, student loans, all the usual financial pressures that make people do stupid things. "Fine," I said, "but I'm not going to the 3rd floor again." Deal. That night, security did come by more frequently. It helped, a little. I still heard the footsteps, but I tried to tune them out, focus on my work. I had my headphones in, listening to music, running cables, mounting equipment. Around 2 a.m., I needed to go back to the server room on the 2nd floor. As I was riding up in the elevator, it stopped between floors. Just stopped, hanging there, the lights flickering. "Come on," I muttered, pressing the emergency call button. Nothing. The button didn't work. The lights flickered again and then went out completely, leaving me in absolute darkness. I pulled out my phone for light, and that's when I heard it. A voice coming from above me, from somewhere in the elevator shaft. "Help us." It was a man's voice, hoarse and desperate. "Please, we're trapped. Help us." "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking. "We can't get out. We've been here so long. Please help us." The elevator suddenly lurched and started moving again, up to the 2nd floor. The doors opened and I practically fell out into the hallway. The lights were on, everything was normal, but I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. I called Sarah again. I didn't care that it was 2 a.m. When she answered, groggy and annoyed, I told her I was done, finished. I'd pack up my tools and send her an invoice for the work I'd completed, but I'm not coming back. "David, please." "They're in the building, Sarah. I don't know what they are or what they want, but they're there. The men who died, they're still there, and they're asking for help." That's impossible. Then you go work there at night. You deal with it. I'm out. I hung up. I never did go back to finish that job. Sarah tried to call me a few more times, even sent angry emails about breach of contract, but I ignored all of it. Eventually, she hired someone else to complete the work. I heard later, through the contractor grapevine, that 2 other IT guys quit that job before someone finally finished it. They wouldn't say why they quit, but I can guess. Artemis Data Solutions opened their offices on schedule. They're still there, as far as I know. Employees working there every day, using the network I partially installed. I wonder if any of them have stayed late at night. I wonder if they've heard the footsteps. I wonder if they've seen the writing on the wall. I wonder if they've heard the voices asking for help. I don't do night work anymore. I turn down any contract that requires after-hours access to empty buildings. My income took a hit, but I sleep better at night, and that's worth more than any paycheck. Some places are wrong. Some places hold on to their tragedies and won't let go. The Artemis building is one of those places, and those 3 men are still there, trapped somewhere between the floors, still calling for help that will never come.
I'm Emily, and I used to be an Airbnb host. Used to be, because of what happened in my guest house 3 years ago. I haven't rented it out since, and I'm not sure I ever will again. I live in Vermont, on a property I inherited from my grandmother. The main house is where I live, and there's a smaller guest house about 100 yards away, separated by a line of pine trees. It's cozy, well-maintained, and was generating pretty good income from Airbnb guests, mostly couples looking for romantic getaway or solo travelers wanting a quiet retreat. The booking came in late March of 2021. A woman named Michelle, 38, from Boston. She wanted to rent the guest house for a full month. This wasn't unusual. I'd had a few longer-term guests, usually remote workers looking to escape the city. Her profile looked normal. Good reviews from other hosts, polite messages. She mentioned she was a writer, working on a novel, and needed complete solitude and quiet to finish it. I approved the booking immediately. A month-long rental meant steady income and less turnover work for me. Michelle arrived on a Thursday afternoon, and I met her at the guest house to hand over the keys and show her around. She was thin, almost gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes and hair that looked like it hadn't been brushed in days. She was polite but distracted, barely looking at me as I explained where everything was. I attributed it to travel fatigue or stress from a writing deadline. "I really just need to be left alone to work," she said when I had finished the tour. "I have some intense deadlines and I need 0 distractions. Is that okay?" "Of course. That's why most people come here. If you need anything, just text me. Otherwise, I'll leave you to your work." She nodded, already turning away from me, dismissing me. I didn't take it personally. Writers are weird, I told myself. Creative people need their space. The first week was completely silent. I didn't hear from Michelle at all. I could see lights on in the guest house at night, sometimes very late, which made sense if she was writing. Once or twice I saw her sitting on the small porch staring out at the trees, but she never waved or acknowledged me when I was outside my own house. On day 8, I got a text from her at 3 a.m. "Is there anyone else on the property?" I was asleep, but saw the message when I woke up. I responded, "No, just you and me. Why? Is everything okay?" She didn't respond. Later that day, I texted again. "Michelle, just checking in. Did you need something last night?" "I thought I heard someone outside the guest house. Probably just an animal." "Probably. We have deer, sometimes raccoons. Let me know if you need anything." No response. 3 days later, another text, this time at 2 a.m. "There's someone in the woods watching the house." I was awake this time, couldn't sleep. I called her instead of texting. She answered immediately. "Michelle, what's going on?" "There's someone out there, in the trees. I can see them." "Where exactly?" by the big pine tree, the one closest to the house. They've been standing there for 20 minutes. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside. From my porch, I could see the guest house and the line of trees. I scanned them with the flashlight. Nothing. No one. Michelle, I don't see anyone. Can you describe what you're seeing? Tall, dark clothes, just standing there, watching the house. I walked closer, crossing halfway between my house and the guest house. Still nothing. There's no one there. I'm looking right at the spot you're describing. Silence on the phone. Then, they're gone now. They must have left when you came outside. Do you want me to call the police? No, no police. I haven't been sleeping well. Sorry for bothering you. She hung up before I could respond. The next morning, I walked over to the guest house and knocked on the door. Michelle answered, looking even worse than when she had arrived. Her eyes were bloodshot, her skin pale, and she was wrapped in a blanket despite the reasonable temperature. Are you okay? I asked. Do you need anything? I could bring you some food or... I'm fine, just working hard. The book is coming along. Michelle, I'm concerned. You don't look well, and these texts about someone watching the house? I said I'm fine. Her voice was sharp, defensive. I'm paying for privacy, and I'd appreciate if you'd respect that. I backed off. She was right. She was paying for the space, and I was probably being too intrusive. Okay, but please, if you need anything, reach out. She closed the door without responding. The texts continued. Every night, sometimes multiple times. They're back. I can hear them on the roof. Someone tried the door. They're calling my name. I checked every time in the beginning, but I never saw anyone. I started to think Michelle was having some kind of mental health crisis. I researched whether I could legally ask a guest to leave due to mental health concerns, but everything I found said I needed concrete reasons. Damage to property, disturbing neighbors, violations of house rules. Being paranoid wasn't grounds for eviction, apparently. On day 23, I got a call from Michelle's sister. Hi, I'm looking for Michelle Crawford. I believe she's staying at your property. Yes, she is. Is everything all right? That's what I'm trying to figure out. She's not responding to my calls or texts, and I'm worried about her. She's been struggling lately. Can you check on her? Struggling how? A pause. She was hospitalized about 6 months ago. Psychiatric hold. She thought people were following her, trying to hurt her. She was doing better, but then she told me she was going to Vermont to write, and I haven't been able to reach her in over a week. My stomach dropped. I'll go check on her right now. I walked to the guest house and knocked. No answer. I called her phone. I could hear it ringing inside, but she didn't pick up. I knocked louder. Michelle, it's Emily. Your sister called. She's worried about you. Can you please just let me know you're okay? Nothing. I used my key to open the door. Michelle, I'm coming in. I just want to make sure you're all right. The guest house looked like a disaster area. Furniture had been pushed against the windows. Pages and pages of handwritten text were taped to every wall, covering the windows, the doors, everywhere. The words were mostly illegible. Frantic scrawls, the same phrases repeated over and over. Watching, they know, hide, can't see, watching, watching, watching. Michelle was in the bedroom, sitting on the floor in the corner, wrapped in blankets, rocking back and forth. Michelle? She looked up at me and her eyes were completely void of recognition. You let him in. You're working with them. You let him in. Michelle, no one is here. There's no one but us. You're safe. They're everywhere. They're in the walls. They're watching through the windows. They know everything. She started crying, her whole body shaking. I called 911. The paramedics came, along with police. Michelle fought them at first, screaming that they were part of it, that everyone was working together to get her. They eventually had to sedate her to get her into the ambulance. Her sister arrived 2 days later to collect Michelle's things. I'm so sorry, she said, crying as she looked at the destroyed guest house. I should have known she wasn't doing well enough to be alone. I should have stopped her. It's not your fault, I said, though I felt guilty too. I'd seen the signs and done nothing. The sister explained that Michelle had paranoid schizophrenia. She'd been managing it with medication, but had stopped taking it a few months ago, believing the doctors were part of the conspiracy against her. The novel she said she was writing didn't exist. She'd been writing down her delusions, trying to document evidence of the people she believed were stalking her. I spent a week cleaning the guest house, tearing down all the papers, moving furniture back, repainting walls where she'd written directly on them. Even after it looked normal again, it didn't feel right. Because here's the thing that still bothers me, that I've never been able to explain. When I was going through the papers she'd taped everywhere, I found drawings. Dozens of them, sketched in the margins of her frantic writing. They showed a tall figure in dark clothes, standing among trees, watching a house. And in one of those drawings, she'd added another figure, someone I recognized immediately, because she'd captured them perfectly, the way they stand, their distinctive profile, even the clothes they've been wearing. It was me, standing outside my own house with a flashlight, looking at the guest house and the trees beyond it. And from her perspective, from her window, I would have looked exactly like the drawings she'd made. Just another dark figure, standing in the night, watching. She'd drawn this picture before I'd gone outside. I know because I found it dated in the corner, drawn on day 6 of her stay, 2 days before she first texted me about seeing someone in the woods. I don't know what Michelle saw out there in the darkness. I don't know if her mental illness made her see things that weren't there, or if somehow she saw something that was going to happen before it did. I don't know if her paranoia created a self-fulfilling prophecy, or if there was something more to it. What I do know is that I haven't rented out the guest house since. I can't. Because sometimes, late at night, I find myself standing outside my own house with a flashlight, looking at the guest house and the trees beyond it. And I wonder if I'm the watcher she was so afraid of. I wonder if I always was. And I wonder if somewhere, Michelle is still rocking in a corner, still writing in her frantic scrawl, still drawing pictures of me standing in the dark, still watching, always watching.